right, we're up and running. Makes it very difficult because I've got two screens going and one has a lag, so that makes it so much more fun. We're going to be talking about today is two different bills that are looking at the nation about how we're going to do it, what we're going to do. What makes it really interesting today is I'm actually spending the week interviewing with state representatives and senators about all the issues that we have in the state level, but these two are national. So everything I'm doing right now with them has nothing to do with these. These will come in later when we're talking to them. What we're going to be going over first and foremost is the PRO Act. Everybody needs to have an understanding of what's going on with the PRO Act and what consequences there can be. So we're going to talk about from a Policy Network website, talking about what the PRO Act is, and then actually we're going to go to an article from the National Association of Realtors saying what they're trying to do to make it as smooth as possible. So it's a very interesting situation that we're in, and we've already seen some effects, and we're going to be going over that here in a minute. Because California did something similar in their state and had to go back and repeal a lot of those things because it had such drastic effects on employment. What the PRO Act is the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. It's been introduced in Congress and with the Democratic majorities in both chambers and an endorsement from President Joe Biden. It stands a real chance of passing despite previous defeat. Legislation is making headlines for its likely impact on independent contractors. Perhaps its most disastrous feature is that it will ban right-to-work laws nationwide and strip local unions and businesses of the freedom and flexibility needed to craft workplace agreements that respond to the unique needs of their workers. The biggest issue with this, and the reason it has so many issues that we talk about, is right now 27 states, including the state of Texas, have right-to-work laws on the books. Two others are considering that legislation this year, so it could make it up to 29. Now, the nice thing about these laws is that it protects workers from being fired for not paying union dues while ensuring that they still have the ability to join unions voluntarily. What this does is kind of a mix of both worlds, where it says you have the right to join a union if you choose, but you don't get penalized if you don't want to join the union. And that's a nice benefit to have. Unions have a purpose, but the problem is when either the employer or the union has too much power, the pendulum of power swings and creates a lot of bad things on both sides. When you have situations where an employee is only allowed to lay so many bricks per hour, and those are when stuff can kind of go in there and make life difficult. The problem with this rule, and this is a quick map of the states that have right-to-work laws. As you see, Texas is one of those. The problem with this rule is independent contractors will lose their independence and likely their jobs. Taking real estate for what we do today, almost all real estate agents are 1099 employees. The great thing about being a 1099 employee is, one, you get to write off the majority of your expenses. Two, no one can tell you when and where to work. You will set your own hours. You set what you need to do. If this law gets passed, the PRO Act would impact independent contractors, including traditional freelancers and those who make a living via the gig economy, real estate agents, things like that. If this law is passed, all 1099 employees have to become regular employees, which means they are now an employee. They have to have salaries. They have to set work schedules. And if you're working in real estate, that's very difficult. On a real estate agent standpoint, what makes that terrifying is we set your hours and how you want to do things. As a real estate broker, it's terrifying for multiple reasons. One, now if every single one of my agents is now an employee, I now have to offer retirement plans, I have to healthcare plans, I have to hire to do different things. Well, tomorrow is our awards banquet, and unfortunately, not every single agent in our office is getting an award. Some agents are part-time, some agents are just starting out, but I can't have a full-time employee that I'm having to pay a set salary if they're only closing 1-2 deals a year, 3 deals a year, whatever it is. So the difficulty is the agents that are in the retiring phase, starting up phase, or they do it on the side for income, just for fun, or what they want to do, they're going to pretty much be eliminated because I can't pay to have an employee who's not working hard, who's not working out full time. We have agents who are multi-million-dollar agents while working as a part-time job because they have a full-time job doing something else. Well, if I now have to have you as an employee, how does that go into effect? How does all of the structure that we have and we've created over the lifetime of being in real estate and allowing for the flexibility of showing homes after hours, on weekends, doing all these things going to be affected when you now have a set schedule and have a set time of when you can and cannot do things? So it's a very, very uncertain for how we're going to be able to handle things and how we're going to be able to work. California actually passed this with what they used as an ABC test into law with an Assembly Bill 5 in 2019. And in less than a year into existence, voters repealed portions of the law via Proposition 22. AB 5 established who can legally work on a contractual basis, who must be a hired employee. As the Research Institute pointed out, AB 5 virtually outlaws independent contractor and freelance work in the state, and the stories of those who lost their jobs in its wake are plenty. Thousands of people lost their jobs, and it made it very difficult. That's why within a year, they had to go back and do some repeals. So it's very terrifying to see how they're going to handle this, what they're going to do, and how that's going to affect everybody. If you're not the best realtor, you may have a difficulty finding a real estate broker who's willing to hire you if you don't want to work full-time, and how you want to handle it. The PRO Act is rife with other proposals that ultimately build up well-funded nationalized labor unions while gutting workers and businesses of the flexibility they need to create quality, sustainable workplaces that can employ Americans for decades to come. The requirements of the PRO Act requires workers' personal contact information be sent to unions in a searchable electronic field or format, prevent employers from hiring temporary workers during strikes, which means the strike can last indefinitely until the employer concedes, removes workers' protection by secret ballot in some situations, subjecting them to union coercion, and limits the information workers may receive during a union-organized campaign. The arguments in favor of the PRO Act are the legislation will give workers more bargaining power on the job, give workers more freedom to organize without employer interference, and protect strikes and other protest activity. This is definitely something that's being pushed very large by the unions, good, bad, or indifferent. We don't really have unions in the real estate industry. What we see is we have real estate associations that we are all members of and work with, but having the union backing doesn't really do us a lot of good. You know, if all of my agents came to me and said, we're going to unionize, I'd say, okay, whatever. Don't see how that's going to work for you. You go out there and work. If you make money, great. If you don't, I'm not paying you. It's one of those things that really helps one group of people, but denying the 1099 is a terrifying process. States are going to be working what way they can do and how they can handle it. Now, I bring up this article first. Now I'm going to go back to the National Association of Realtors articles that is literally labeled "Don't Panic Over the PRO Act." There's reason to panic. They talk about what they've done.
And Andrew, can I interject for just a second?
Yes.
So a lot of the conversation actually stemmed to like Uber drivers. So the conversation became Uber drivers would now become employees in this circumstance. This is what actually led to a large part of the repeal when it came to California, because Uber drivers tend to do this as a secondary income. Well, now they were obligated to have a lot of ramifications because they became employees, and it was not substantial. So a lot of people you mentioned lost their job. A lot of people just couldn't work anymore because they couldn't meet the obligation of the secondary income that they were doing, because now restrictions of timelines and stuff like that came up. And that goes for in the office in Century 21 Hager, there's multiple agents that do this as a secondary income. They would not be able to fall under this obligation because there would be restrictions that would fall into play. And based on, like you mentioned, the size of the company, requirements by the federal government to put in things like insurance, health care, stuff like that comes into play. Well, that actually can negatively affect some people as well, because some people may be receiving insurance at a discounted rate based on their income level. Well, when the employer is mandated to put health care into play, now things change dramatically in that circumstance. So now it goes to the fact that you would actually almost sometimes be hurting some employees because of the situation. And this was the big point that made California repeal most of its requirements. And I think that the federal government is now making a push for this. And you are right. It is led heavily by lobbyists distinct with unions. So it's scary. It's scary.
It is. And the problem is, we're real estate agents. We understand the real estate industry. I don't understand other 1099 industries. I don't understand. We're talking before this class got on. I know a lot of hairdressers and things who actually rent a chair from a studio and actually just are independent contractors in that studio or that shop. Will that be allowed with this change, or will they have to become employees of that shop, and how will that affect things of how they can and can't work? There's so many unknowns, and as someone who has been in political office, we don't we pretend like a lot of times politicians pretend they know everything and know what's going on and how they work, and they don't, and they just take away from what they need to do and how they want to do it. Most people get into this kind of work, the 1099 works, photographers, freelance workers, advisors, real estate agents, real estate appraisers, all those things, because they don't like having a boss. They don't want anyone to tell them what they can do, when they can work, when they can't work. The nice thing about this business is we work long hours, but we get to pick our hours. We can go coach a kid's soccer game. We can go do what needs to be done. And there's no one who can tell us we can and can't do it. As long as our clients are happy and we keep them well involved, there's no one that you have to answer to except for making sure you're not breaking the law with your broker. This could have a huge effect on those things and how they work. Now, NAR is working very hard to push for independent contractor protections. And even if the Senate declines to act on the bill, their advocacy team has launched a vigorous effort to educate lawmakers on how indispensable the independent contractor classification is to our industry, and it sure doesn't apply to realtors. The issue is El Paso alone has over 2,700 realtors right now. Now, just because you're a realtor doesn't mean that takes into effect all licensed realtors, licensed salespeople. The term being a realtor just means you're a member of the National Association of Realtors. If you choose not to join that, you are still a licensed salesperson who has the right to sell real estate. You just don't belong to the real estate association. So there's probably closer to 3,500 licensees in El Paso County who could be drastically affected by this bill and how it goes into play. If you're a full-time nurse, if you're a full-time whatever you want to do on the side, you work for the county, you work in accounting, whatever it is you do, and then you do real estate on the side, you're a teacher who does real estate in the summers, whatever it is, it can drastically affect your ability to do what you need to do. And that is what's terrifying about this bill. And I want you guys to be aware of what's happening and how it's working. The National Association of Realtors is working very hard to make sure people are understanding of how it's working. Senate Republicans are united in opposition to legislation, as are some Democrats. So it takes 60 votes to advance legislation in the Senate. There's always been a bipartisan interest in a real estate specific exemption for any ABC test legislation. We are just not a system that works in the 9-to-5 model. Real estate doesn't do that because most of the people we work with who are trying to buy or sell a home work in that 9-to-5 model. If you tell me I can go see homes on after 5 or weekends, and I say, hey, I work 9-to-5 too, I don't get off until, that's when I'm off too. It's really going to affect your ability to do things. Does that mean overtime's involved? How is that going to play out? Are there daytime agents and nighttime agents? There's so many risks and concerns of how it's going to play out as a broker who is going to have to figure out how I can hire these employees. It's very easy right now to point the finger at the big, bad, horrible business owners thinking that we're sitting on piles and piles of money, but it's just not true. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Brian, did you have anything else to go over?
It affects it affects the biggest thing that everybody cares about, their commission. Because if you become an employee, you are now a W-2, which means you're no longer a 1099, so you don't get to do all the write-offs that we do currently. But also, it means that the broker, as the employer, will now have to pay a portion of FICA, and therefore now paying 7.5%. So you're going to strip 7.5% out of every commission dollar automatically.
No, and the question will be, will the commission go straight to the brokerage and you get an hourly pay? And if you don't meet that hourly pay, are you let go? How is it going to play out? It's kind of a terrifying situation, and we just need to watch it carefully. And I want to make sure everyone's aware of this and what's going on and how it works. So the PRO Act is in the process, being talked about right now in both the House and the Senate of the nation, and I want to make sure you guys are aware of what's going on and how that's playing out. Now, the other one I want to talk about, because I think it's also very important, is there's another one where the administration is trying to create a $15,000 home buyer tax credit. Now, this was a huge advantage to the real estate market in 2000 and I want to say 9 or 10 when it came out about in Barack Obama's term, 2009 and 10. The only bad thing is we're not in the same position we were when it was done in 2009 and 2010. Remember, 2009, 2010, we were coming out of a housing crisis which was much different than the housing crisis we have today. The housing crisis 2009, 2010 was, we had the situation that the economy was flooded. We had a huge number of foreclosures. There was a lot of inventory on the market. Today, we have a very, very, very small inventory. And if you start giving a $15,000 home buyer credit, it's going to shrink that inventory even more and make it almost impossible for the new home buyers to even still qualify. So I want to go into that and discuss what I'm talking about, and then we'll go over it a little bit more. So about 9.3 million renter households are in the U.S. 27% would spend less than a third of their income on the monthly payment for the median home sold in their metro in 2020. If they receive the full tax credit, that is, of course, if certain stars align, think a 3.5% down payment on a 30-year mortgage with a 3% interest rate. Given these facts, the tax credit would cover a borrower's entire down payment for a home in 40 of the 50 large metros. Now, to qualify to be a new home, a first-time home buyer, you have to obviously, one, never owned a home, or two, never not have owned a home in the last 3 years. That is the definition of a a first-time home buyer. So to qualify for these requirements, you have to not have owned a home in the last 3 years or never owned a home. The great thing about that is it gives you an opportunity to work on how you want to do it. In 2008, 2009 when it first came out, there was 2008 there was a $7,500 tax credit. And 8,000 2009 2010. Now the 2008 credit you had to pay back, where the 2009 2010 you did not have to pay back. It was just it was waived. Like I said, the terrifying thing is, as real estate agents will agree with right now, the market is saturated with buyers. There's not a lot of inventory. Homes are actually selling much higher than listing price, which is creating a huge, drastic, almost frenzy for the buyer's market. You start now giving every buyer a $15,000 tax credit on top of that. If they're first-time home buyers, it's just going to shrink the availability of homes even more and make it kind of difficult for them to even so qualify, because there's a reason they're probably renting and don't own a home currently. So it'll be interesting to see how this will affect things. To date, the administration has focused on COVID-19 pandemic, and given that the U.S. housing market is at its hottest point in a generation, prices are already at a peak. So it may not be a priority at this time, but it's still something that is being discussed. A consequence of creating a $15,000 down payment assistance program is the demand it would create on a market that's already struggling with supply. The Census Bureau found that just 307,000 new homes were on the market in January, roughly 4 months worth of supply at the current sales rate. And as for how much borrowers paid that month, the median sales price was around $346,000. Well, the actual sales price averaged closer to $409,000. Pushing prices out of reach for those who would receive the down payment assistance. So what's going to happen is you've already got a very much condensed market with not a lot of supply. You're going to tell these people, okay, we're going to give you a $15,000 tax credit or down payment assistance, or however it's going to play out. There's usually some, if it's going to be a down payment assistance at the beginning, there's usually some red tape involved. If I've got, and we've had it in El Paso, 50, 60, 70 offers, one of them has red tape and a down payment assistance, one doesn't, it's going to make it difficult for that one to be picked. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't think it's going to happen in the short term, but you're going to be hearing from your clients or people in the area, hey, what's going on with this? It may cause some buyers to hold off and say, I'm not going to buy a house right now. I'm going to wait and see if this $15,000 tax credit comes into play. And the question will be, how will it be? Tax credit will be a game changer for many renters, particularly those who struggle to save for a down payment in high-cost metros. Right now, the average renter only saves about 2.4% of their income each year, which means it would take about 14 years to equal a $15,000 down payment, which would make them available to be able to purchase a home sooner. Problem is, are they going to be priced out in the current market with how things are going in the market? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Brian, do you have anything to say on this topic?
Yeah, so I heard an economist that basically came through in the marketplace and discussed the fact that this may be a Fed method to try and pop the bubble, if you will. Because what happens when you provide these tax credits is traditionally what will happen is people into the market that may not necessarily be the most financially responsible people in the marketplace. And by bringing those people into the market, there might actually create some depression in value. because what might happen is they get into it for a year. They may not realize the requirements of home ownership. You know, we work with a lot of renters, and those renters, they have this idea that all things will get fixed right away. Well, when you become a homeowner, now you have to do those items yourself. So therefore, now we're looking at the concept of, okay, now you have to get those things done. Well, a lot of them may not do that. Therefore, the house may become dilapidated. They decide just to walk away because their initial aspect wasn't financially conscious in the purchase. It's kind of like, you know, you have to put money, you have to have skin in the game, right? And now that you have no skin in the game, what's keeping you from walking away, just like you could walk away from a rental home? So this becomes the equation of whether this is going to now depress the market enough to try and get us out of this inflation bubble that we're in, because we're not in a housing bubble in the same format that we were previously. Now we're seeing inflation prices just exorbitant. I mean, El Paso last year saw 15% appreciation rates. We're estimating just this year alone that we may see somewhere in similar category. Where El Paso normally sees 2 or 3%, now we're seeing 15%. That is a dramatic difference, and that can change the entire feeling and dynamic of the market. And that is the biggest concern that kind of comes down to play, that if they roll this out, are they depressing the market more by doing so? And then it brings in the conversation about the 10-year yield bond rate and the discussion of, is that by it raising so dramatically over the last month and a half, rates have to play catch up to it because people are moving their money from one industry to another. That's going to change the whole dynamic as well, because now you're right, it's going to depress values, but now people trying to come in with their 15,000 DEX credit, are they going to be irresponsible with the offers they're making because they could qualify, because they don't have to have the cash in hand to do so? Remember, when people qualify, they take your gross income. Well, Andrew and I both have spouses that are in the education industry, right? And they sound like they make a good salary, but then you take out their retirement, you take out their insurance, you take out all the stuff, and we're left with quite a bit less than what they say they made, right? Well, they use the money that they say they make and their gross amount when they're calculating payments. It's not the best route in general sense, and it can set up for some financial failures in the future if you're not being responsible about it. I've seen some people stretch the debt ratio to as high as 52, 55%. That's 55% of your gross income. I look at my wife's check and she walks away with about 60-ish% of her income after everything's there. So we're talking, you have, in that case, 5% of your income left over. That number doesn't work when you qualify that. So just some food for thought in the marketplace. It has to be a responsible place, because Andrew and I both took part in that 2008, 2009. We helped the bubble happen because people were walking in, buying houses. They were qualified as per the lending rules at that time. Well, now these rules don't always make it the right thing to do. And wisdom has been implied on me and Andrew over the last 10, 15 years. Now's the question of all those other realtors out there that didn't have that wisdom implied. Where are we going to put ourselves in the next 12, 18 months?
Yeah, exactly what Brian said. I mean, remember, guys, there's a lot of people in this industry have gotten into real estate during this last year, which means they only know the COVID experience. They only know the market going crazy, where if you put a house on the market on Friday, you have 7 offers on Saturday. It won't be like that forever. Lawrence Yun, the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, an insanely brilliant guy. If you ever have the opportunity to listen to him speak, do so. He puts out an amazing article every month in the Realtor magazine. But he says preserving the 1031 exchange is the incentive. Land sales for buyers is key for the future of the housing market. An extra 15,000, he said, won't help with the already low supply of homes available. Only with added supply will the home buyer tax credit be effective in boosting home ownership and enlarging the middle class. Without supply, home prices jump much higher with no meaningful gain to new home ownership. And that is exactly huge. What I want to get from this is basically what Brian already talked about. If you have a client, if this does pass, or if you're dealing with first-time home buyers or anything like that, you need to remind them of certain things. You know, if you've been renting a home for 10 years and a toilet leaks, a water heater leaks, a sink is having issues, you make a phone call and someone magically comes and fixes it. When you own a home, you are that magic person who has to now come and fix that home. So making sure to explain to them, you have to have money for it set aside for when the roof leaks, for when the water heater goes out, when the plumbing has issues, when it's time to repaint, when it's time to do all of these different things that you want to do, it has to be done. What you qualify for and what you're comfortable paying are usually extremely different numbers. So having that conversation is insanely valuable with your buyer when they come to you and say, I qualify for blank. That number is a fake garbage number. It tells me that my maximum, but it's not a realistic number. What do you pay now, and what will you be comfortable paying in the future? That is the number that I need to be effective. If you're used to paying a $900 a month rent and you go buy a house at $1,900 a month, you're probably setting yourself up for some serious, at the best case scenario, heartburn, worst case scenario, financial disaster. Because if you're not taking into account the fact that your kid now needs braces. 3 months ago, I got a notice that 2 of my daughters needed braces at the same time. That was an $11,000 bill. Making sure you have the knowledge of, I've got to pay braces. I've got to buy a new bike when they outgrow their bike. My daughter's in every sport possible. My son's in every sport possible. Are we paying for sports? Are we doing that? My car goes out. Your brakes go out. You've got to prepare for those things both in the home and in real world. And if you're not preparing your client for that knowledge and that fact, and they're blinded by, I can qualify for this gorgeous home, they have to remember the real world. So if this does pass, or if you are working with first-time home buyers, it's a great time to remind you and to remind them that number is a great that tells us where we need to stay below, but we need to stay below that number. Just something to think about, something to go. Brian, anything else you want to go over?
No, I just want to make sure that everybody realize this is why it's important to keep an eye out on the republic that we have created. We need to know what's going on in the legislature. We need to go what's going on in the city government. We need to know what's going on in the state government. Guys, there is the discussion right now at the federal level of removing the interest deduction. So interest on your mortgage, removing that deduction off of your taxes. That would drastically change most people's taxes if they own a home. There's also a discussion right now in Texas about adding gross receipts tax to realtors' commissions. Now, they bring this up every single year, but this is why it is so important to be knowledgeable, to make sure you can call your local representative and say, gross receipts tax would drastically change my business, and make sure that they're aware of it. So don't just disregard when you get those notices from whether that be the Association of Realtors, whether that be the Texas Association of Realtors, whether that be the local Greater El Paso Association of Realtors. They are looking out for the interest of the real estate agent. Keep an eye on it, keep a pulse on it, and also open up the articles, read them, because your clients may be now asking you about them.
Absolutely, guys. And that's the thing. When someone, the reason we want you guys to know this stuff is because they're going to ask you these questions, and I don't want your answer to be, what? Have some knowledge, have some understanding, and be able to have an explanation of what's going on, why, how it's going to work. A couple of things I want to remind everybody. I know this is on Facebook Live, but it's important anyway. Tomorrow, April 1st, new contract goes into effect. You have to use the new contract for Texas starting tomorrow. Also, since tomorrow is April 1st, today is the last day to pay your dues for the local associations, both at Las Cruces and El Paso. So if you've not paid your dues yet, get on and pay your dues, because it's a $50 or $100 fine if you don't have them paid today. So make sure you get out there, pay your dues, get that done, and keep up the great work, everybody.
Excellent, guys. Great attendance today. Remember, you can always post your comments. We appreciate all of you. Andrew, thank you for knowledge base always. Tea with Andrew every Wednesday, 3 o'clock. Guys, we'll see you there next time.
Appreciate it, guys.